Hello viewers, for today's video we're taking a look at FlightGear and, well, more specifically of JFS Copilot, the program that I created to use with FlightGear way back in 2013. It's been mostly untouched except for a bit of work I did this morning to get step climb to be a feature. Automated step climb, I should say. So now we're going to ignore the fact that ignore how underdeveloped this model is. I don't think it's been touched since its creation back in 2009. So, just a reminder of JFS Copilot requires that the aircraft's autopilot system be very similar in structure to the generic autopilot, or that that aircraft not have a custom autopilot at all. So, for it to function, we're going to reduce fuel load first, because this plane is actually more efficient than the real thing. So the way this works is I have to be above a quarter of total fuel amount, capacity, and I need to have a cruise altitude target that is at least 36,000 feet. I'm going to go for 41,000. And when that happens, it will set my initial target altitude to 6,000 below. Oh, why did I do that? It's 95 at 1. Okay. So, yeah. 1 second here. Gotta punch in all the parameters for flight. Get my joystick ready, and then hit the start button. We are now in takeoff mode. Just gonna guide the plane down the runway. I'm gonna bring the HUD up so we can see what the autopilot's doing. So I bump the mic. A little bit of lag. Let's rotate. So now the gear up, we're in the climb out. Flaps are also retracting. I am going to go into the route manager and hit activate, since the JFS Copilot is no longer able to do that itself. And now we should be switching to climb. We have switched to climb mode. And our target is now set to 35,000. So I chose an even 1,000 number, so that way it would, when it would choose the target, it would still have you at the correct whether you should be even or odd, or whether you're going east or west. Okay. Next, I need to, I might as well get my radio set up. Okay. So let's take a look at this code while we're here. So we are in the climb phase. Right. Now, there's a couple conditions here, but I'm going to explain it. So, if we are in climb, and my fuel is more than 25%, or if my cruise altitude is greater than or equal to 36,000, then we use cruise out 1. That's the new variable to say, hey, no, we go to this altitude first, and then go to cruise altitude. It sets that up as the target. And the reason why I set it up that way is because what if I'm flying the Beaver or the Rally or some other propeller-driven aircraft? Well, I'm probably going to have more fuel, but I'm certainly not going to be flying high enough for a step climb to make sense, right? So obviously if I'm flying cruising at like 3,000 feet, I don't want FGFS Copilot to say, oh, you should probably cruise at negative 3,000 feet first, because that would be a disaster. Right? It's an airplane, not a land shark. Yeah. So, as we are climbing, you see I have made a few adjustments here, where I'm just checking that condition again, and then choosing which cruise altitude target to use. And then, so far, everything else is the same. Cruising is going to be different. So we come back to our sequential phase finder one more time, and I've made the necessary adjustments, I think, in the random phase finder. I'm not sure, because I threw this all together in just an hour of feverish typing right after waking up. So, and then a bit of debugging on the fly while recording about 3 hours ago, before OBS decided to die. So, hopefully everything's fine. So the other thing is, once we are cruising, and I know this looks like spaghetti code at this point, I tried to make it nice and say, hey, check and say what if we're in climb out, or if we are in cruise 1, and I added, you know, a way where it would say cruise 1 or climb 1 or whatever, and it didn't work. It just wouldn't. So I had to just write code that would make it work, even though it's not very elegant. Okay, so let's get done ranting and actually say what I wanted to say. So if we are in cruise and fuel is less than 25%, or, and this whole thing has to be true for it to work, you got the parentheses working in there, or the default cruise altitude is less than 36,000, you know, the one that I punch in. I don't think it was going to step, because I need that to be greater than. Then we check to see, am I 3 times the distance away from the top of descent? Okay, we're accelerating now that we're above 10,000 feet, by the way. Because I want to make sure I have time to climb up to do my step climb. So yeah, I need to force terminate that, start it back up. Punch in all my data again. Hit my start button, and hopefully it does the right thing. Give me climb mode. Climb mode. Good, and the autopilot still shows 35,000 as the target, so that's good, that's what I want. Okay, so we're still finding problems and fixing them. So where was I? So here we go. So then, if all of these conditions are met, so once again, we're in cruise phase, fuel has dropped to less than 25%, cruise altitude, the number that we punch in right here, is at least 36,000, and we are, our distance, total distance from the airport, from the runway that we're going to land on, is at least at least triple the top of descent distance. What the heck did I do here? And no, that makes no sense. Notice I haven't bothered to change my annotations at all because I just want to make the code work. So I hadn't gotten to the part where it actually does the step climb before when I was recording last time, so it's a good thing. I'm finding the problems and trying to fix them now. So then we go to climb. Then we'll go back to climb. Then just gonna put that there so it makes sense. Then if we're in climb and we're close to the cruising altitude, then we go into cruise. Okay. And that needs to be an and as well. And once we're in climb, we don't care about the distance. So the thing is, there is no way to go from climb straight to descent, like in the super speed version of GFS Copilot. So we make sure we're at least triple distance out for top of descent before going into that step climb. So let's say you planned your fuel poorly, and maybe you don't feel like cheating and just dropping the fuel load, like I would for testing. Then what's going to happen is you'll just not do that step climb. You'll just go to your top of descent. You'll descend a little early because it's going to be your top of descent calculated from the cruise altitude that you input. I say that you input, it doesn't really matter now because there's no sense in releasing this as it's totally obsolete. There's so many very nice planes in FlightGear now that there's really no sense in having this anymore. But I made this, I was proud of it, and I made a huge document, wiki page for it, and it was great, but I never got the chance to properly video document it, and I kind of want to do that now. But then I also wanted to add in this thing that I had been thinking about while I was unable to run the FlightGear on the computer I had at the time. So I'm going to double check this, make sure it's the correct one. Yep. So basically, if you don't get your step climb, then it would just be beginning your descent about 18 miles early, right? 3 times, you got your 6,000 foot difference is 3 times 6, 18. Okay. So hopefully I have this set up right. I'm going to bring up our fuel payload and put it over here. And actually, I'm going to move this over here so you can see relevant stuff over here. So we can see the distance and the time to the waypoint and all that good stuff. And yeah. And by the way, we can see the Rocky Mountains off in the distance here, and over to our left. If this had recorded properly on the first try, then we would have gotten to see a nice sunrise at the same time. But fortunately, I'm still trying to figure out how to use OBS, and I'm hoping the recording quality is actually decent enough that you're able to read my code and the relevant information that I'm trying to point out here. So I've been rambling on for about 15 minutes, and we still have, well, we're in about a 3-hour flight. So I'm going to stop talking now. I'm going to pause recording, and then I'll get back to you when I have more things to talk about. Okay, so we are now climbing through flight level 260. See, our vertical speed is only about being set at about 500 or thereabouts. So that's because that's about as fast as we can climb at 300 knots without exceeding 95 N1. So that's a really high throttle setting. We can see on the HUD here. So luckily, if you look over here in this area, you'll see I'm just at the bottom corner of the PFD, bottom left. My Mach speed is now 0.735. So once it hits Mach 0.74, then I'm going to enter Mach speed mode. So what Mach speed mode does is it takes a look at my Mach and it says, okay, if I'm above the target Mach, then it sets my target speed to half a knot down from my current speed. Not the current speed setting, but my current actual speed. And then, what is this? Because I wrote this a while back. Okay. If it's less than or equal to my Mach speed, well, 1,000th of a Mach number down from my target Mach, only then does it increase by half a knot from my current speed. So I would need to be less than, instead of Mach 0.74, less than Mach 0.739 before it starts increasing speed. So now we're in that Mach speed mode. You can see indicated airspeed 298 knots. And if I open the autopilot setting, you can see it's actually pretty precise. It's looking at my exact airspeed. So to make these adjustments, and it's going to do it periodically. What that's going to do now is, as speed drops, you see the throttle drops, and that's going to say, oh, well, my N1 is below 95, so I can increase vertical speed. And then as I climb higher, Mach speed's going to drop, so it's like, going to go, okay, well, you need to drop indicated airspeed more. And then throttle drops again, and it's like, okay, we're below 95 N1, you got to increase vertical speed. So it's kind of like a positive feedback loop. It's just doing it over and over again. And but it's going to even out probably around, I don't know, 700 or so. It's going to give you a little bit more climb rate. It's not going to be a whole lot. So again, the flight dynamics model of this aircraft, as I said earlier, it's a little bit dubious. It's still believable that it's an airplane. It's just it seems to not be quite spot on as to what the CRJ-200 should be. And I'm not saying that because I'm an expert or anything. I'm just saying I looked at a Wikipedia article and I saw what the specs were, and I saw, oh, well, the range says this. And then when I load the fuel, based on an expectation that, hey, I should have this amount of fuel remaining, roughly, just a rough estimation, and it was like I wasn't really burning much of anything, and I was like, something seems not right. But it's still close enough, and it will still reach its flight ceiling, so it does all the things that we need it to do. You'll notice we've only traveled about 100 miles, and we started at 60%. We burned 9% of our fuel. So you might think, oh, well, this looks bad, because how am I going to burn 9% 10 more times? Ignore me. I mean, I would still technically be on, I would be able to come in on fumes if that were the case, but point is no. This is the burn rate between takeoff and climb. Just a reminder. So burn rate is going to drop down quite a bit while I'm in cruise, and then even more so through descent, until I get to about approach. So yeah. Let's see now, 287 knots, 600 feet per minute. So we're maintaining about the bare minimum of an acceptable climb rate. Now, if I were to climb all the way to flight level 410, that climb rate would drop significantly. So we don't want that to happen. We want to burn some fuel off, lighten the load, so we can climb a little faster, more efficiently, ideally. And that's the whole point of doing a step climb. So yeah, here's hoping my code works right, because if it doesn't, there's not much I can do to prevent me from having to just redo the whole flight. So yeah, we're just going to continue like this up to flight level 350. Alright, we are about a minute away from top of climb. We've been holding steadily at least 500 feet per minute. So, not bad. So, as we switch from climbing to cruise, we want to see that nothing strange happens. On my prior attempt at this, it immediately switched my altitude to the altitude that I had input here, instead of the one that is in here right now, the one that's 6,000 below that number. And it nearly ended the flight, because it bit into a climb at a much higher climb rate than what the aircraft was capable of maintaining. And then instead of saving the plane, I scrambled to correct my code, and we had dropped to a speed of 160 knots. We were just about to stall when everything got corrected. Alright, so... and now our climb rate's slowing down. But anytime now, we should be switching over to cruise mode. And good. Target flight level 350. Alright. So we've gone from 60% to 47% fuel in just the climb. Just the takeoff and climb. We still have a couple hours to go. We want to look at this number that's 938. We're looking for when that gets to about 360. That's not the total distance, actually. So, total distance, with that shoving route manager. No, that's just the distance to the waypoint. Then there's an additional 13.3. So I could bring that up in the property manage and property browser, property tree browser, but I'm not going to this time, because I've already gone and brought the HUD up, because the panel is missing some bits. So when this gets to be about 363, we're going to want this to be 0.25 or less. So if I still have too much fuel, then I will cheat. I will use the load fuel button, and I'll punch in 25% to make that happen. Because right now we're not doing this just for the sake of realism. and enjoying a nice flight. We're doing this so that I can test my code. So I just wanted to add one last feature before I guess I abandon this for the rest of eternity, I guess. So yeah. I'm going to pause recording now, and I'll get back to you once we've gotten significantly closer to our destination. Okay, I've done a couple more calculations, and I've decided that the limit, that 3 times top of descent, make it 2.5 times top of descent. So it gives me a little bit more time to burn more fuel if I need to. So I feel like the 3 times top of descent might be a little bit too much. But we'll see what happens. And hey, if I hit that 25% and I have end up with 400 miles to go or something like that, then it's still going to do that climb. So either way, I think this is good. That's right, I need to stop this and then punch all the numbers back in. So let's do that. Our start button. It'll quickly put me in cruise mode with altitude 35,000 feet. I am going to check the route manager. We don't want to go direct to the airport. We want to go to our custom instrument approach intercept first. Okay, and I believe we should be set now. Alright, so once again I'm going to pause recording and then get back to you when we get closer. Alright, so I forgot to mention, so 2.5 times the top of descent distance is going to give us about 307.5 miles. So it's not a whole lot lost from 363 that we're going to have. And again, I'm estimating because I'm not actually considering that 92 feet of touchdown zone elevation in the equation. So yeah. But by the time we get to about 307 miles, not from the waypoint, but from the airport, then hopefully we're by 25%, and I'll be looking for that, when it gets about 310, I guess, by the waypoint, because that will give me more time to react if I end up finding that I need to cheat. So I brought up the route manager, and we have the estimated time en route, 6,300 seconds. Total flight time, 3,600 seconds, so it's been an hour. So you can see we're a little bit more than a third of the way through our flight. Roughly, by this estimate anyway. By the distance, I thought it was 1,200, so it was 1,150 or something like that. So we're a little bit further, maybe by distance, so that's good. We've burned through almost 1/3 of our total fuel load that we started with. So I'm beginning to wonder if maybe I had not actually loaded enough fuel. We will find out as we get closer to our destination. Or maybe I'm just worrying too much because the first half the fuel that I burned so far was just from taking off and climbing, and then the other half was in cruise. So have plenty of time to go. So if anything, I may end up having to reduce fuel and to dump fuel to see if this actually works. Something I may have forgotten to mention. I know I mentioned it the first time I tried to record. Anyway, you look in the bottom right corner of your screen where I have Eclipse. We're looking at the cruise phase. That's what we're in right now. So right now, since it's just looking at my fuel, and it says, okay, I'm above 25%, and my autopilot is set to, so I'm above 25%, and the autopilot is set to that cruise altitude, that first cruise altitude. So not the one I input, the one at 6,000 below. That way it knows that, okay, we're in the that lower cruise state. So it still runs cruise mode the way it normally would, but with that target, with that 6,000 below. So if my fuel was above 25% and it said cruise mode, then it would say, okay, we're going to set the autopilot to that value that I actually punched in. Now, what should happen is when my fuel gets below 25%, there's going to be an issue here where if it doesn't switch me to climb, back to climb phase, it will still try to climb to that altitude that I punched in, and probably at an inappropriate climb rate. So that's why I kind of need the step climb to work, because I haven't really figured out a way to make this more elegant so that it won't do that. What I could probably do is just say, and wait a minute, I can probably just take out this else. If I take out that else, then when it goes into climb mode, climb phase, we'll say, okay, cruise altitude is not less than 36,000, but fuel is less than 25%. Use this number. So I'm actually going to fix that now. And the way I know that'll work is because in the sequential phase finder, if I am in cruise and the fuel drops below 25%, and my cruise altitude is above 36,000 feet, and I have more than 2.5 times the distance to the top of descent to go, then I go back into climb. So since I'll then have less than 25% fuel, when I go into climb, then it's going to say, hey, I have less than 25% fuel, or cruise out less than 36,000, but one of these conditions has to be true for the whole thing to be true, and so it's going to use the number I punched in. So I'm going to go back to cruise phase, and I'm actually just going to delete this. And then that should work, because it sets the altitude in the climb phase. The only downside now is if I were using random phase finder, then it would not go through climb phase first. It would go straight to cruise. But it only sets the target if this condition is met. So if this condition is not met, then it won't set the target. Actually, if I look back in the original FlightGear Copilot X, the latest one, what I can see is cruise phase. Yeah, cruise phase still sets the target altitude because you need to do that in the random one. That's the problem. So if I'm in the random thing, my fuel is less than 25%. Less than or equal, and here's that one is not in the thing. So it'll determine cruise at 1. If cruise at 1 is already in the autopilot, and my fuel is above 25%, then no, it will still not run this. Okay, so we're good. We are actually fine. Okay. So for anyone curious, during that little bit of random where I was talking about sequential and random, let's see, okay. So I have what I call a random phase finder, which is this mess. Then I have a sequential phase finder, which is this slightly less messy mess. If we ignore all that commented out stuff, it looks a lot cleaner than this stuff. So the differences between those two is random phase finder is what happens when I first hit that start button. I can hit that start button during any phase of a flight, and it should, what it does is it looks at all the different flight parameters that I'm currently dealing with, whether I'm on the ground or off the ground, or climbing or cruising, ascending, or whatever, or how close I am to my destination, or if I have, if I'm receiving navigation stuff on the radio, reception. If I'm getting reception from a nav station or an ILS, it's checking all that. And from that, it determines what phase of flight I'm in. But that's a slow way to check through it. So once I'm done, once I hit that start button and it does its thing, that's it. It doesn't run through this block of code anymore, assuming I've written this correctly. Let me see, if we go back to run, we go straight into sequential phase finder. Right. Okay. Start button handler, maybe? Yes, so start button handler runs the random phase finder. Okay, good. And then from there, that's the only time it runs random phase finder. So it's much faster to do the sequential phase finder because that doesn't have to look at quite so many variables in FlightGear. It doesn't have to pull up in the properties a whole bunch of stuff like the random phase finder does. because that can just reference the current phase of flight and say, well, logically, if I am cruising, then the next step is to descend. Except in this case, now that I've added step climb and I've made things a lot more complicated. Before it was, okay, if I'm taking off, then the next step is climb out. You know, if a couple of these options have been satisfied, like I've hit VR, well, the takeoff method would actually do the rotate. And so once my altitude, my AGL gets above 25, it's like, okay, we're doing climb out, which is just to kind of fly the runway heading, and get the gear up, and get the flaps up, go up some altitude and airspeed before turning. And then at 500 AGL, then it goes to regular climb, which starts navigating on the route. And so on and so forth. Pretty sure I've explained all this in past FGFS Copilot videos, but I'm actually not sure, so yeah, that's what those are. Alright, here we go. So I've decided I'm going to have the sheet. I've looked at the fuel consumption rate, fuel burn rate, and determined that I will not be down to 25% by the time I get down to about 307 miles or whatever it is. So I'm instead going to make it 0.3, 30%. I think that's a nice number we can do. So I'm going to do that. And I'm going to restart FGFS Copilot. Punch in all my data again. Now in reality, step climbing would be done over multiple steps, usually on a much longer flight. So you'd have steps of like 2,000 feet. But here, well, it may be possible that the A380 has not yet been updated enough to make a FGFS Copilot not work. But the main issue for me would be the time constraint. I'm not sure I have 6 to 8 hours to put into a long-haul flight and test all of this. And to also deal with troubleshooting as I go, so getting it to step up and step up and step up. So instead, I'm just going to do the one step of 6,000 feet. I think that should be reasonable enough. Just to see, mainly, can it be done? And we are about to reach 30% right now. So I'm going to pause recording, and then I'm going to unpause once we hit that 30%, because it's still going to be, maybe, could be up to 10 minutes, just for that 1%. Okay, so see 30% here. I'm going to bring up the property browser. So we have 30.4% at this time. I'm just watching that slowly burn away. 23. So, is it all that realistic to be doing a step climb in a CRJ-200? Probably not. but this is the fastest way I can test out code to automate this sort of thing. Alright, looks like we're still going to be here a little while before we get below that 30%, so I'm going to pause recording one more time, and then I'll unpause when we get closer. Alright, there it is, we're just about to hit it, 30%. Our distance is good, we're both beyond that distance. There's 30%. We're back into climb mode. We are back into climb mode. This is wonderful. I believe it's working. We're still going to climb slow because the CRJ-200 has probably some FDM issues where even while underloaded, we'll still struggle to climb to that 41,000 feet. I'm pretty sure it's not common for this plane to fly at its flight ceiling. Probably not normal at all. But that's what we're going to do. So yeah. So the idea was that by doing the step climb, you would have a faster climb rate. Now the issue is, and you'll notice that as we went to climb, two things happened. So our altitude target got switched to 41,000, and then that started the plane nosing up right away, so that was nice. We got some climb rates, about 500 feet per minute almost, before it switched into vertical speed mode. Because otherwise it would have only, because in vertical speed in climb mode, and I've probably already talked about this before, but it can only increase vertical speed by 25 feet per minute. That's how it's set up. So this thing iterates over and over fairly quickly, at a fairly good rate. 25 FPM per minute seems to be good enough. And then it'll drop if the N1 is too high, it'll decrease vertical speed by 10%. So right now we're climbing at about the same rate we were, or lower, than when we first climbed up to 35,000 feet, flight level 350. But now also notice that as we're climbing, our indicated airspeed is dropping to maintain the Mach speed. So yeah, it's probably not going to make much difference in this case with this example. But the proof of concept is there. 621. Yeah, I kind of figured that would be a bit high. Yeah, we are still reducing climb rate. Yeah, we're struggling to hold on to even just 500 feet per minute. So yeah. Now the real test will be to see, will it go back into cruise? And I think it will. I'll be happy to see that. I'm really happy that this is working as intended. You know, it's still not quite a correct, proper, realistic step climb, but it is still a step climb. So if I had the time, and if I had a good reason to, I could adjust FGFS Copilot to implement proper step climbing. And yeah. So part of the reason why I had decided that should not bother with the climb unless I'm at least 2.5 times type of descent out from my destination is because I anticipated that this aircraft model would still only be able to climb at about 500 feet per minute. So from climbing 500 feet per minute, a difference of 6,000 feet, that's going to take 12 minutes at Mach 0.74, I'm traveling about 8 miles per minute. So 12 minutes times 8 miles gives me 96 miles that I would travel during the climb. It would be silly to climb and then immediately descend. So instead, I want to be able to cruise for a little while, even if it's not quite a whole hour. And the reason why I have this dialog open again and this one open again is we're looking at that distance remaining. I'm trying to see, well, 307 here, 28% there, but this is the number that really matters. So would 25% have worked? We are climbing, so we're technically burning more fuel than before. So we are at a higher throttle setting. But then during the cruise, we should be burning less fuel once we get established from a cruise. So I'm going to take a look and see, hey, was I right in adjusting that setting? And it kind of looks like I was. If we come back here to engines, and fuel flow, I don't remember what it was. Hang on a second. They've actually been the same or more during cruise than what it is now. So, yeah, it's definitely less now than what it was earlier during cruise, despite being at a higher throttle setting. So, yeah, I guess the step climb is kind of silly for this plane. Manager, there we go, 307.5, and we're not down to 25% yet. So, granted, we're flying a little bit more efficiently, despite this very slow climb rate. And that's really the issue here, is, okay, seems to have switched me over to cruise. It did it a little bit early, so now we're struggling here. Did it very early, like 1,000 feet early. That's not supposed to be doing it that early. No, it's supposed to wait. So, my guess is weather changing probably did something, and it just went straight into cruise mode. So you see I lost a lot of airspeed, so now I have to get that back. But the main thing is that I wanted to burn some fuel away, get the aircraft lighter, so that I could climb faster than just 500 feet per minute. And no, I'm still struggling to maintain even just 500 feet per minute. Okay, so we have about 50 miles to go till a descent. You'll notice things are very quiet right now. I went to check something, and I don't think my computer was able to deal with that too well. Thankfully, I haven't lost the video. I'm still flying. I've only lost all of my audio from FlightGear. So, yeah, it's going to be very weird trying to land without any audio cues for the landing gear and the flaps, or for the thrust reversers. And I apologize for how weird this is going to be. And now I'm looking at my keyboard and realizing the button to initiate the flight reversers is right next to the power button. And that's concerning, so hopefully I don't screw that up. Okay, well, great. Okay, we should be switching over to descent any time now. I think I need to fly a little bit longer. About here, I think. This is still really weird not having audio. There we go. So, I checked my settings, the audio settings in Windows, and it's as if FlightGear doesn't exist. So, for whatever reason, I have no means of getting that audio. So, we're just going to have to deal with not having audio. So, let's explain what's going on here. So, just like before, you can see we have the vertical speed. It's calculating that VNAV down. For descent mode, that's speed mode. That's not what I want. Descent phase. There we go. So, we have that VNAV down. Using that formula to calculate, based on my ground speed, what vertical speed I should hold to reach the touchdown zone elevation with it by the time I get there. If we go to the speed mode, descent speed mode, so now I want to look at that. So normally we would want to say, okay, set the speed to 250 knots. Except you'll see that I wasn't at 250 knots yet right away. There we go, it went back down. So you'll see I'm above my cruising speed. I'm at Mach 0.752. So if we look at Mach speed mode, right, we have this. So when we are looking at our speed mode finder, if the phase is descent, and we have not gotten to the condition for reducing to Vref speed, then if the airspeed is less than 250 knots, and our Mach speed is greater than the Mach cruising speed minus 0.002, then we remain in the Mach speed mode. So as we descend, we're going to need to increase airspeed to maintain Mach. So if that speed bleeds off too quickly, then it goes back to 250 knots setting. But then once again, once you get above that cruising Mach speed, it'll go into Mach speed mode again. So now we're low enough that we're just going to hold 250 knots. And man, it just feels like I can't hear the airplane, and it feels like I'm not recording, but I am. This is really disorienting for me, just not having any audio. Okay, so now we've gotten to the point where we're like, okay, we go into descent mode, descent speed mode, which is just, well, if it's a jet, 250 knots. Okay. Then from there, the next thing to happen will be the Vref mode, landing approach speed. So here we have this nested if statement, and what this one is, we want to be 2 times the approach distance away from our destination. The approach distance is simply what's our approach speed, divide that by 10, and that's the approach distance in nautical miles. So I put in 133, so our approach distance is going to be 13.3 miles. So at 26.6 nautical miles, it's going to reduce further from 250 to 133. So, yeah, we can get to that when we get there. Alright, so now we've descended through flight level 180. Let's get the altimeter set. And let's actually go ahead and take a look at the fuel. 23%. Nice. So, I don't know, this thing's so efficient. Okay, so I've noticed in the PFD here, I am receiving some kind of navigation signal. So I'm going to keep an eye on what FGFS Copilot is doing. I already have the ILS frequency put into the radio, put into the active slot of the Nav1 radio. So we could get some weird behavior, but I don't think we will because I've done extensive testing into this airport in particular. At least I did before, back when I was first making FGFS Copilot. So I don't think anything too drastic will have changed, but it's just something to keep an eye out for. Okay, so now we're 13.3 miles out from the waypoint, which means we are 2 times the approach distance out. There we go, we see the throttle slam shut. So indicate airspeed setting is now dropped to 133 knots. And vertical speed setting is being adjusted accordingly still. I seem to be intermittently getting some DME readings. 20, is that 20 miles? Let me do this. 21.7. Yeah, that seems correct. Okay. So it looks like I might actually be getting the correct frequency. I mean the correct signal on this frequency that I'll be going into the ILS, which is what I want. Okay, so just hitting that waypoint for the instrument approach. Intercept. And we've switched into the ILS approach mode. So we have Nav1 for our guidance. And I missed it because of the lack of audio, but yeah, gear and flaps are down. Obviously my hands were on the keyboard because I was managing the camera, but that wasn't me putting the gear and flaps down, that was FGFS Copilot. And we can see the runway just vaguely off in the distance there. And now we're intercepting glide slope. This looks quite violent. That was full weightlessness there, just about. Wow. That was weird. it pitched down so hard that it tipped over the wing a little bit. Okay, so we're still descending even though we're below the glide slope, but we're descending slowly. So I think we might be okay. I probably should have used a slightly faster approach speed though. I'm not feeling too good about this. Uh, 22%, so it's not like we're really heavy. I think I just set it up with too slow an approach speed. Um, the autopilot seems to be handling it okay. We're just coming in with a rather nose-high attitude. So that's what our plane looks like while we're descending. You can see that the nose is coming down a little bit, so that's good. Right, looks like we are now stabilized on approach, and just in time. So you can see perfectly lined up on glide slope, about just about perfectly lined up on localizer. So I'm going to get myself set up with my joystick and prepare for touchdown. So I'm actually going to move my throttle up so that actually no, because it's going to drop the throttle anyway. So it's I've already gone through the whole flare height thing in the other videos. I forgot to do that this time. So what's happening is it's looking at my vertical speed and calculating is going to pick an altitude that is 5 times my descent rate in feet per second, an altitude in AGL, I should say. And at that point, it's going to switch into flare mode. Now, before I had used 4 seconds, but then I had problems with that, so I switched it to 5. Ideally, I would be able to have the program run at a consistent rate based on the frame rate of FlightGear, but that feature is broken in the new FlightGear, so I can't do that. And this is going to be terrible without audio, but I'm going to do my best. All right. 150. Okay, we're in flare. We're in flare. That was kind of rough. Okay, that's not good. That's not good. That's not good. Okay. Thrust reversers on. And disengage thrust reversers. It's still using the brakes. There's 40 knots. Now it's going to release. The Chief's Copilot is ready for another flight. And I need to slow down a little bit more so I don't destroy my aircraft. There you go. So we are here in Houston George Bush Intercontinental. I have forgotten to make the airport diagram ready for me to view, so I have no idea where I'm going right now. This airport is absolutely massive. So yeah, I know I was on 8 left, so there's an 8 right runway to cross before I get over there to where the other planes are. But yeah. So that's going to do it for this video. Hope you enjoyed. Again, apologies for the audio issue. I was trying to multitask a little bit while recording, and apparently my PC didn't like that very much. So we got a very quiet arrival. I'm hoping the rest of the video turned out fine, and that everything I've been saying has been recording okay. That is going to conclude all of the video documentation on GFS Copilot. So yeah, I guess that's probably it for this program now. I don't really have a reason to mess with it anymore. A lot of the planes in FlightGear are much nicer now, um, crammed with tons of features, tons of realistic systems, not just the realistic autopilot, but you have your pneumatics and anti-ice, and better flight dynamics models, and CDUs and FMCs and EFBs and just all the good stuff. So yeah, all right, I'll see ya.